And then the one sentence origin story, that there's going to be some conflict happening just because what we bring to knowing about a Scottish Presbyterian and an Irish Catholic, that there's going to be conflict. And again, I wanted, how are we going to go about understanding how that happened?
Yeah. And that was immediately followed by the second one sentence about her being 19 and pregnant. Which
right.
So you could see that there was obviously
kind of
controversy there. But actually, I got the feeling that was less important to her father than the fact that she was marrying a Catholic.
Tracing lines on an old worn map, names like whispers in a memory's gap.
Welcome to GenClub. GenClub? Let me explain. We are a group, a panel, who get together after reading a selected family history article that we find on Substack. And we just kind of dive right into it and discuss it. And this was our very first episode. We had the best time. We connected over an amazing Substack post by one of our community members. And the panel, they're exceptional. They bring candid insights and years of genealogy experience to our discussion. It truly felt like friends gathering over coffee or tea and then getting to share our thoughts about this article, about genealogy, which we love to talk about. Honestly, at times I forgot the camera was rolling. It was a lot of fun. I invite you to be a part of this experience as well. You can read the article too, see what you think, and then add your thoughts in the comments. We'll be more than happy to keep this conversation going. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. And there's a little surprise at the end, so keep watching. Our guest author for this episode of GenClub is Lisa Maguire. Lisa has a gift for weaving family history into large stories of time and place. In Griffintown, 1861, Molten Metal, she doesn't just recount events. She immerses us in a neighborhood, a moment in history, and a family's lived experience. Her writing reminds us how powerful it is to bring our ancestors to life through storytelling, helping us understand them on a deeper level. The GenClub panel read her article, Griffintown 1861, which takes us into the world of the Gordon family, newly arrived in Montreal's Griffintown. Surrounded by the clang of the blacksmith's hammer and the glow of furnaces, their story reflects the resilience of Irish and Scottish immigrants, carving out lives in a new and difficult place. Through the Gordon story, we see how one family's journey can illuminate an entire neighborhood's history. I invite you to join us as we dig into this article and talk about the history, our opinions about the family, and the impact Lisa's writing has made on us. Let's jump right in.
Well, I was going to say that I usually don't like it when stories begin with Griff. I really liked because of the metaphor with the sugar caramel. So I really liked that part.
Well, to me, it was just, I want to know more. And it also reminded me of a lot of my stories that I have a sentence and that's all I have are two sentences and I have to research. So I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, God, that just reminds me of, I did something and, it's similar to that. So many of our stories are like that. We don't have much information. We just have to start digging. So anyway.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the generalizations that we have about our family or ancestors and how we really don't completely understand them until we dig deeper into their story the way we often do. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I agree with Julie in a way. I tend to want to just dive into the story rather than have all the bit at the beginning. Although I was struck by that first sentence and thought, oh, yeah, that's right. Exactly. I really just wanted to get on with the story then. And so the molasses bit didn't really appeal to me. I skipped over it. which is interesting. It's just a different, I tend to be into facts and I want to get there and find out what happened. Whereas other people prefer to read the descriptive bits. I skip over the descriptive bits and go to the, so I think it depends, whatever you do, you're all different people want to read different ways.
Yeah. It definitely is a lyrical opening. You really, the pretty prose. So
yeah.
It has a little bit of both. I wanted to know more about the story, but I also wanted to read more of the writing of this story. So
yeah.
And then the one sentence origin story, that there's going to be some conflict happening just because what we bring to knowing about a Scottish Presbyterian and an Irish Catholic, that there's going to be conflict. And again, I wanted, how are we going to go about understanding how that happened?
Yeah. And that was immediately followed by the second one sentence about her being 19 and pregnant, which was, So you could see that there was obviously some controversy there. But actually, I got the feeling that was less important to her father than the fact that she was marrying a Catholic. And I noticed further on that her mother had actually been pregnant when he married her father. So maybe
that was my point.
So maybe that the fact that she married an Irish Catholic was far more important to her father than the fact that she was pregnant.
I think so too. Yes.
Yeah.
I really like the contrast between the one line of fiction and the one line of fact. Like it's not really fiction, but the girl was disowned for marrying an Irish Catholic. That's a story. You don't know if it's true or not. And then the fact. There's a one sentence of fact. So I really like the contrast in those two paragraphs.
Yeah, she did really well with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I started thinking about the fact that her father was, he experienced what he experienced in the Highland clearance. And he was basically vulnerable to whoever the landowners were and had to change his life completely because of that.
Right.
And that seemed to be his driving force, to me anyways, once he got to Griffintown. He was going to be a landowner, many times over. And so it seemed to me like he was really trying to better himself and his family, give his family that opportunity, like many immigrants do. They give up everything they know to go to a new place and start over. And that is to have a better life, usually anyways. Sometimes it's not, but it usually is. And so it just made me wonder if he was just pretty disappointed in Marion because once she had followed in their footsteps with getting pregnant while unmarried, and then basically, just kind of not allowing him to rise to where he wanted to rise,
Well, I found it interesting that her dad allowed, rented to Irish Catholics. And I would think he would have been open, because evidently, he was okay about renting, but he wasn't okay about her marrying him. But
I guess
the whole thing about her being pregnant and thinking about his wife and how they struggled probably at the beginning with her bringing, although a lot of they didn't marry until they had kids. I mean, I've had my grandmother and grandfather, my grandmother was pregnant when my mom was before they got married, so that's not been that long.
I guess he just saw it as a step too far. Renting to Catholics is one thing, but your daughter marrying them is another.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah. And I noted also that Marion's mother was already deceased by the time she married, so possibly she might have tempered his attitude a little had she been alive. But of course we can't know that. But
Yeah.
Since we're talking about John, one thing I found interesting is that Lisa does a subsequent post, Griffintown, 1863, where the view of John is somewhat softened by, I don't know if you all have to read that, but it is, perhaps he was sponsoring orphan children. And I wanted to ask, would that be, did Lisa's view change, because of that, her view of John? And was he really that harsh, or was it just what the record is saying is that she didn't live there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And she does say in the subsequent post that her view of him did soften after she learned that. But I mean, I didn't think it was unusual at all that she was disowned for marrying an Irish Catholic, because I just know so much prejudice between, maybe not prejudice is the right word, but between Catholics and Protestants. Because my father was Catholic and my mother was Protestant, and that was a problem in the 1950s. So that's, 100 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and that little, just that one piece about the prejudice between religions, I mean, that changed her life dramatically. That altered her life and her daughter's life. I mean, it almost like took what he was trying to do, at least if that's what he was trying to do, is better himself and just make the next generation have to start over again.
Well,
And I assumed that he had told her not to do it. And then another piece of it was, you didn't do what I told you to do, which may then have even been more important than, marrying a Catholic. But, if you're not going to do what I tell you, then you can get out, basically.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
now they were remarried. I mean, John remarried.
Yeah.
They were married at the time. Yeah. So I guess she wasn't any influence on him as far as softening him about the whole thing.
Well, I don't think she was able to get him to go to the better neighborhood.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I mean, he was obviously a very frugal man. He was hardworking. He was quite astute and had a keen ear for opportunities about the place. And he was obviously prepared to sacrifice his own comforts and more to get ahead. Very outwardly mobile, really.
yeah. So let's talk about the gaps in the record. So Lisa tells us, what she doesn't know or what she can't know. And that was whether or not Marion's baby was actually Michael's.
I was really intrigued by this. I was so intrigued by Mary's parentage and Michael's parentage that I hived off to Ancestry to look them up. And I actually came across Lisa's tree. And I could see there, assuming she's the home personage, I could see that Mary Maloney was her great-grandmother. And so that made me wonder if she'd DNA tested, because you would think that you should be able to figure out if Michael is Mary's father or not, although it's complicated by the fact that Michael, his own parentage is unclear. She talks about his mother being his adopted mother. She talks about his father, Patrick. She never mentions him as his adopted father, but I think at one point she said Patrick's adopted son. So I wasn't quite clear about his father. But you would think with the name Maloney, which was different to his father's name, that his mother was probably a Maloney. So I was desperate to know what Lisa's DNA results would look like and whether there were any Maloneys in there.
A true genealogist you are.
That was the bit I found really intriguing.
I just really wasn't worried about that. I didn't even question that. I just felt like
I didn't either.
I mean, it was they got married. Her dad and mom, they got married. Or there, it's the kind of thing that I didn't even question it. That didn't do anything to me. I had a question about where John got his money to begin with, and evidently I would know more if I read the previous post. But I wonder where he got money to come over there and start, building, buying up.
Yeah, that was interesting, because when he got there, the prices of real estate were just as high as they were in Europe.
What did his dad do? And see, again, that's if I didn't, I haven't read the other stuff. So if they talked about, we just learned so much about, a lot of things, when we see the parents and whatever.
Yeah, I don't know where he could have gone there.
It sounded to me like a neighborhood where it was like, a very cutthroat neighborhood where, if you had that kind of personality, you could just lie, cheat, and steal, to make your money. And, it looked like if he was going to throw his own daughter out, then he probably threw all kinds of people out if they were a day late. And, then he probably got somebody else in. So he probably was able to make a lot of money that way, because it said they could charge. The housing was so expensive, they could even charge people for living in the doorsteps and the stairs. So I think he probably, did that. And that's how he got so much money.
He's a wheeler dealer.
Possible.
Yeah, it probably points to why he never left the neighborhood either. He was the big fish in that pond. So
Right.
why go strive, to be a smaller fish in a more fancy pond, I guess, to keep money.
And kind of keep control of what's going on, especially if he has a lot of property. And then he's a money lender, which she doesn't really explain that. But, that's
I saw the money lender thing somewhere else. Where did I see it? I think it was on Who Do You Think You Are, where there was a very poor family living in a very bad neighborhood in, I think, Liverpool or something, England. And the woman, who was a widow, was a money lender. And I thought that was so strange, but they explained it that was a common profession because people couldn't go to banks. And so they would just go down the street and borrow money from the local lady, and that a lot of widowed women made their money like that.
Oh, that's interesting.
We definitely have to have something to start with, but
Yeah,
I
but
guess
they would start by lending out, tiny sums, like, like
yeah,
a
with
dollar.
big interest. Yeah.
And then, go on from there. And even the money lenders in Who Do You Think You Are, they didn't end up, with getting wealthy. So they were still only lending tiny sums of money. But
Well, she's saying most blacksmiths had a sign line of money lenders, and that's interesting. And I kind of like to know a little bit more about that angle of what he did.
Yeah, I wonder if it was out of necessity because, did they just not make a lot of money being a blacksmith?
Well, he'd have to have money in order to lend it.
That's true. Maybe that was why, because he had a lot of money.
Yeah, he had a lot of money, and
there's probably a lot of activity. Yeah, opportunity to, if you're blacksmithing, meet more people in and out, to do nefarious things as well as legit things.
Right.
One of the things that I found interesting was something Lisa did in it, where she talked about the difference between a blacksmith and a foundry, a person in a foundry, and how a blacksmith forges versus the foundry they pour into molds. It just made me think that, it made me wonder if she was trying to create this or allow us to understand John as a forger, as a making things out of whatever is in front of him, rather than pouring it into the mold, which is basically like doing like everybody else does. It just made me think about it.
Or his is more of a skill, more skilled craftsman, I would think.
And it's hard breaking work as well. He was obviously a hard worker.
Yeah,
definitely. Well. Yeah. So,
and I was thinking how he molded not mold, but when he shaped the metal, it was like he was shaping other people to his will, also kind of making other people do what he wanted them to do.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, and then it was interesting that everybody was there at his area. People would stop by and talk and, gossip and that kind of stuff. It was kind of a meeting place for the guys.
Yeah.
That was neat. Well, he couldn't have been really, really bad unless people liked to hang around him because he had money and maybe he would give them some.
Yeah, that sounded like quite a community hub in a way, didn't it? Everyone came there. And he was too busy working, but he had his ear to the conversation in case there was an opportunity to be had.
Right.
Yeah, it makes me wonder about how he, how that was really, it was like a game changer for him because he had the information from the entire community there.
Yeah.
Just makes me wonder, was somebody gossiping about his daughter there?
Yeah.
That would have been a trigger. So let's talk about the rear tenement building situation for Marion. How do you guys feel about that?
That was awful.
Yeah, it's very disappointed in him, really. Very disappointed. Particularly, he had a granddaughter there as well, and that hadn't softened him either.
Yeah.
Could we figure out how old the baby was when Michael died? Oh, okay. He died in 1865. All right. So the child was 4. Okay. So I was just wondering because I I had done a post on my great grandmother's dead babies in New York City, and it was saying that the death rate was so high because the conditions were so unsanitary. And so, especially if your home is next to the outhouse that, 50 different people are using, then it must be so unsanitary. I was amazed that the child lived, but I guess at 4, maybe she was a little bit, she had maybe some immune system.
I guess. I mean, I'm looking at the picture now. It's like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Yikes. Yeah. So I think that was the point where I was really very disappointed in John Gordon.
Yeah.
I just
Me too.
didn't think that
likewise.
Because
anyone
he
would
was
do that.
punishing that baby. He punished his wife by his daughter, but he was punishing that baby. And
Yeah.
I can't understand why he would do that, or why his wife wouldn't say something like, that's your granddaughter.
Yeah.
Well, I just feel like people back then were like, well, you made your bed, now you're going to lie in it.
Right.
If you got pregnant, somebody would throw you out. They didn't care what happened to the baby.
Yeah. It was definitely a different time.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, but yeah, I don't know why they would do that, but I guess people were tougher back then.
Yeah.
Or,
And
I mean,
having
or we
made
don't know if she was like, I'm not taking any help from you. You treated me this way. I want to be independent. It could have been that too.
Yeah. I wondered that. Yeah. I wonder, and plus, those years after her mother died, she was just basically on her own because her father was working, her brothers were working, and her sister was married off. And I just wonder if she resented all of that, it's like having to raise herself.
We don't know to what extent she still had a connection with her sister. I think it was her sister Anne who was at her wedding, who went to her wedding. I think it was the only family that did. So we don't know, I don't think, whether she continued having a relationship with her. You would think that her sister, might have continued to have a relationship given that she was a witness at the wedding.
Yeah. That's just very sad.
Maybe her father just felt, having made a stand before, he couldn't back down. It's sort of something to do with losing face or something.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But for 5 years living there, that's just...
Yeah.
I wonder
But
how
she
she
also
felt
didn't-
walking past the old house where the new wife and children were living.
Yeah. That one got to me.
Yeah.
It's like she became the invisible daughter because of everything. And I really think it had a lot to do with the fact that her mom died so young. I mean, if she hadn't, I think things would have been very different for her.
Right.
Yeah.
I would hope so, anyway.
And then she didn't remarry for almost 20 years, which I thought was very odd.
Yeah, that would have solved her problems really quickly. So
yeah,
why didn't she do that? Yeah, that is interesting. Which
I think she must have had that independent, I can do it myself kind of spirit.
Yeah. It also makes me think that so one of the questions I've had in my mind is, did she and Michael love each other, or did they just get together because of the baby? And if she didn't remarry after that so quickly, it kind of makes me think maybe they did love each other.
Well, they described him
gave
as
up
this
family and inheritance to marry him, so you would think that she did love him.
Yeah. Well, she was pregnant, so she was. I mean, what else? I've asked myself, well, what else was she going to do?
Yes.
Right.
Well,
But she was going to,
She was pretty just, Okay,
well, he sounded so great. He was like a, big man on campus. He would have been very strong and he had the best job. And so he was the smartest. So I just kind of thought that's what made her fall in love with him.
Probably.
Well, he wasn't like anybody that she hung around with or that was around her or her family. I mean, he was an altogether different kind of guy.
Yeah.
So I could see her attraction to him for sure. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also, the way she's written about it, it's very cinematic, that we can envision this love story and we can envision Michael and his, windy hair and pouring molten, metal into sand and molds and what she gave up and how, what she lost, I guess, when he died.
Yeah. It's almost like her her loss of him was greater than her loss of her family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in the end, the very end, after John Gordon dies at age 92, the granddaughter, Mary, inherits all that property back. How do you guys feel about that?
I thought it
It
was
seems
great.
like a bit of a shallow victory in some ways, because she only really got it because her mother got it because it was a cast off. You know, they were moving on, they were moving up, they didn't want it anymore. And that's the only reason she really got it. So in a way, it seemed like a shallow victory, but it was, I think, a good thing that she did, because at least, you know, it was where it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that that happened.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite clear on how Marion came to own the property again. I know she went to live in it, but I'm not quite sure. You know, they went, the people who inherited it went off and let her live in it, but I wasn't quite sure how she came to own it again in order to pass it on to Mary.
Yeah.
But presumably they must have transferred ownership to her as well as letting her live in it.
Yeah.
Again, it must have just been worthless to them. So, and it was a place for her to live.
Well, they were onwards and upwards. They didn't want that old property.
Yeah. So does anybody have any last thoughts about this?
I had some
I
questions.
just thought it was a wonderful story. And I just really love the description, the details of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I want to know, how did she find out all this? Not necessarily about the family that would be in records, but in what the neighborhood was like.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I certainly felt like I was there when I was reading it. It was a really good description. I felt like I was there, and I didn't particularly want to be there. You know, it wasn't a place I wanted to live.
This place is awful.
Yeah.
Grimy, dirty, and dark.
I think the work I do is I'm hypothesizing about what, you know, I know remnants of what the life was like, but I think Lisa does a really good job of bringing it to life from probably photos and read descriptions. And so I was learning from her as I was reading it. You can, you know, make something so vivid from lines in a newspaper, clippings in a newspaper, and photos that may or may not exactly be of the town, but they're of that era, or maybe they are of the town. It's just really beautifully done.
It was.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
If you guys had the chance to ask Lisa a question, what would you ask her?
I had down, she had written in a comment that, you know, traveling back in time, Marion is the ancestor that she would want to meet. And, you know, what is that one piece of the puzzle that she would want to get from Marion in terms of the whole story? I mean, certainly the whole story, but what was she most interested in understanding about Marion's life?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Well, I would definitely want to ask her if she DNA tested.
Yeah.
She what?
DNA tested.
Oh, did? Oh, really?
Well, I think this has been a great conversation. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to many more with you all. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity, Robin.
But I loved how people were really trying to dig into the psychology of these people, because this has been my obsession. Like, I don't understand these people at all. Like, I have an insight into John Gordon and his ambition and his hard work. And, you know, I think so many immigrant stories we hear are of the success. We never hear the human toll that these success stories exact, right? There's always, you know, that hardworking person from Europe or from, you know, anywhere who comes to a big American city and just makes good. Like, their family members didn't always thrive. And that was the reason, is because that one person's ambition or penny pinching or, you know, single-mindedness, you know, was something that didn't drive them and actually probably destroyed them. So I thought that was something I really wanted to explore. So I think his story was a little clearer to me, but I think everyone pointed out things that the mystery that I couldn't solve. How did he get the initial capital? When he first got to Montreal, he didn't work for anybody. And he seemed to have bought his own home. I don't know where that money came from. One of my friends speculated that he had some big heist back in Glasgow and just ran for another country. I don't know. Maybe he just saved it up over the years of, you know, while he was there. I'm not sure. And then the other mystery was, you know, why did she live in that plank cabin for so law. It just seems she must have really alienated everyone in her life who could have helped her. That's all I could think of. So that's what also softened my view of John Gordon. Once I realized that he had another side to him where he was very community minded and he actually helped people in the neighborhood, I thought maybe, to quote Taylor Swift, maybe the problem it's me. Maybe she was a very problematic person and we just don't know because all we have is the record which shows that she was basically evicted and then she lived in this place for so long. So, I don't know whether there was more to her story. Maybe she did something that alienated a lot of people in her life who could have helped her. So that was the other thing. And the other mystery that I thought was that they mentioned was like whether or not he was a money lender. Like, I'm not sure. I just read somewhere that blacksmiths in Quebec were frequently had a sideline as money lenders. So I presume that he must have done that too. And how blacksmiths lend money, I guess, because they have a yard and people congregate. It's a natural gathering place. It would be a place where you could, try and find someone who could lend you some money. I'm guessing, right? Or they might deal in precious metals. Maybe they have access to money.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, I imagine that that gathering place was responsible for a whole lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I thought that was pretty fascinating. So the questions that they had, one of them was about if you were able to go do a time travel and meet up with Marion, what would you really want to know?
How did she survive all those years? Like what was her experience like and how did it happen? And then, how did she prevail? Because she clearly survived and, created a life for herself and kind of reinvented herself as a Catholic woman, which I thought was very interesting too. One of them was Jane had a question about DNA. So,
oh yes,
yeah, I thought that was really super interesting. I guess the question I have to ask her about this is because I don't have any information on Michael Maloney's family. I believe he may be a famine orphan. I believe his family may have gotten as far as Montreal, maybe died in the fever sheds, and he would have been about 5. Think, and Mary Flannery was a famine migrant. They arrived in 1845, so a little bit before Black 47. So I wonder if priest didn't hand him off to that family, or maybe she's like in the neighborhood. They said, "Can anyone take this 5-year-old boy?" And because he was, they didn't have legal adoption back then, so he kept his own name and probably lived with them. I think that's what happened because he would have. Because I couldn't find any Maloneys in the city directory before that time. So I don't think they lived there. There was any Maloneys that I could have tied to him. And there's no record, no birth record, no record of anything. So that's why my best guess is that he's a famine orphan. And so I don't know anything about him. Like what DNA would I attach to figure out whether or not I'm a Maloney or not? Like I'm not sure how that would work.
Well, I think if you
find somebody.
Have you done your DNA with Ancestry?
I did, yeah. But nothing came up. Nothing came up that I was not connected to Michael Maloney in any way from anybody, which may prove my theory. He may not have been the father. I don't know. It's very interesting. I'm going to follow up with Jane because she may have some ideas about she knows more about DNA than I do. I don't really dabble in DNA a whole lot. So
yeah, she does. She does a lot of that, I believe. Yeah. Well, that would be an interesting little genealogy adventure to go down. That little rabbit hole. Where are you going to do anything further with that story? Or I know you've done Griffintown 1863. Are you still working on that, or are you?
So yeah, I think I would only write more if I found out more, like I did in this case. And when Family Search had the free text search for legal documents, and I was able to find some additional documentation for John Gordon. Yeah. And that's where I thought, oh wow, this is a whole new dimension. I thought that was so interesting. So if I can find out more about the family, I'd probably write more about it. But I think one of the reasons why I was curious to know what people thought of this piece was I was trying to do something original that I don't think I entirely pulled off. I was trying to do something that was combining family history, urban history, sort of creative nonfiction, bringing in some fiction techniques to bring these people alive as characters. And I think what I had is a little ungainly. I think it's certainly too long for a Substack piece, and it's probably too long for, most formats. But what I was trying to do also was create this kind of novelistic time, where you sort of get the whole breadth of this person's life through real estate, because it's a story about real estate, I think, as much as it's a story about Marion, right? And I thought like finding out that his buildings were still standing when I was in grade school is incredible. I don't think my parents knew this. I don't think my father or anyone knew that these buildings had belonged to their ancestor and that they were still standing in Griffintown. Because by that time it was a flop house. Like I found references to that address where it's like, oh, you can rent the room by the week or something. This was in the 60s. And then, of course, it went for sale for very little in like the early 70s. And then it got pulled down shortly thereafter. So I thought it was kind of interesting that it's a real estate story. It's who gets the property, who has access to the property, and what happens to the property, and what happens to that neighborhood. And I think that's just too much. Like, I think it should have been either about her or it would have been about the real estate. And I think I could have woven the information in a little differently. I think that's, but I don't know. I'm still thinking about how I would rework it if I were to do something more with it.
Well, I think for me, it worked. I think the layers of it allowed me to really understand them better. Because if I didn't understand where they were living, what the conditions were, I would not have understood the depth of their experience. That's part of their experience. And me personally, I love connecting that, a house or whatever to the story because it's the setting, part of the setting. So, one of the questions was, how did you find out about, this was a question from Anne. How did you find out about the places, the location? Did you visit there? I saw a picture that you had taken.
Yeah, so Griffintown is a very interesting piece of history in Montreal. When I was growing up, no one talked about Griffintown. It wasn't a designated neighborhood. It was a place that used to exist that no longer existed when I was growing up. And then people have reclaimed it. They've actually sort of rebranded that neighborhood. They still call it Griffintown, but now it's like a tech hub, and there's like they've done their best to destroy all the buildings. The ones that have still stood there, they are now being repurposed, and it's very trendy to like work there. It's not so much a residential. There are some residential buildings, but it's mostly for work. And so there was a tremendous interest in like most of the 80s and 90s starting then about the history of Griffintown and the Irish experience in Montreal right around the time that the Irish community was starting to disappear. And I think that's certainly the people who lived in Griffintown in the early part of the 20th century had sort of moved on, and that neighborhood ceased to be a neighborhood. It was like industrial wasteland by the time I was growing up. And so people started getting really interested in this place that had been erased. There had been so much urban renewal in Montreal that they'd seen all these other historic neighborhoods disappear, and there was a growing interest in them. So because of that, there was a lot of writing about it, mostly about the 20th century, but also about the 19th century. And a lot of urban historians wrote a lot about the experience of Griffintown. And so there was a lot of really rich source material to draw upon. There's a couple of pieces. There's a man named Barlow who wrote his dissertation on, it's called The House of the Irish, and it's about Griffintown. And he writes a lot about that kind of, the deep, like what the anthropologists call the thick description. Like he really gets into like the experience of living there. And there's a couple of other writers and historians that have similarly done that work. And then just reading the old newspapers. Oh my God, like what'd you find out? That neighborhood. There was one piece about how people routinely were getting fined for keeping pigsties. This was like a thing. And they mentioned in the recorder's court, like, something like, this has been happening far too frequently, or this is the 6th time someone's come in front of my docket because they're keeping pigs in the basement or whatever. And I was like, God, this place must have been insane. It must have just been like, there's a bar on every corner and people are fighting and there's like no indoor plumbing. It's just like, I can only imagine what it must have been like.
Yeah.
And of course it flooded every year. So there was this mad tea party of real estate where people were constantly, and people were like, they had the wooden sidewalks became like little rafts and to get from place to place. It's just like, I can't even imagine what it was like.
It was a pleasure talking to you, and it was awesome to be able to deep dive into your article, Griffintown, 1861.
Thank you.
Tracing lines on an old worn map, names like whispers in a memory's gap, a story